Okay, so we're live. We're just going to give it a moment to get some viewers on this morning. Just as a reminder, you're watching Stand Up, Fight Back. And we'll just wait just a brief moment here. So everyone go ahead, stretch your legs, have a sip of coffee, and we'll get going. Okay, so I see a few people now. Good. All right, so why don't we get going? Looks like we're live. Officially live. So, all right. Hi, everyone. I'm Margot Pies, scientist, engineer, and occasional journalist. And this is my amazing co-host, the grassroots organizer, Carlos Marroquin. You're watching our weekly Sunday morning show, Stand Up, Fight Back, where we discuss strategy and analysis for the progressive movement. We simulcast on Facebook and YouTube, so please share us with your friends and family members, like us, and turn on notifications so you don't miss an episode. Today we have a very special guest. Her name is Sonali Kolhatkar. She is an award-winning journalist and the host of Rising Up with Sonali. Carlos, can you tell us a little bit about how we got to have Sonali here today, and maybe a little background on how you know her?
Yes. First of all, good morning, everybody, wherever you may be watching from. So good to have our guest today, Sonali, an amazing journalist here in Southern California, KPFK. She's listening every morning at early in the morning. And if you rise up with Sonali, you are definitely going to be hearing some good news, and or at least you're going to be hearing news as they should be told. Sonali is a very well-respected journalist. And she's one of my favorites. She focuses on the issues that we all care about. So we are very, very excited to have her with us today. And luckily, I was able to book her for this, to have her with us. She's just one of those people that explains the news and not only explains it, she articulates these things in a way that makes sense to all of us. Thank you, Sonali, for being with us.
It's my great pleasure, Carlos and Margot. Thank you both so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. So why don't we just dive right in? It's not like nobody knows what happened this week. We had a bunch of Trump supporters show up on the day that Congress was supposed to certify the election. And on behalf of Donald Trump, they went over to the Capitol and tried to break in. In fact, they did. And I think they had some not so nice intentions, might we say. So Sonali, I think, we wanted to talk about conspiracy theories. And I think a lot of what has been driving people here are conspiracy theories, lies and fake news, and all of that being promoted by the highest office in the country, by the president. And what are your thoughts on what happened this week, and what do you think is causing people to do what they did?
I mean, it's such a big question. As a journalist, I definitely look at it as a problem around journalism. And also, so two things. One, the fact that we've had right-wing disinformation and misinformation parading as news, fake news parading as real news. That is a huge part of the problem. The other part of the problem is that our corporate mainstream media has often missed the boat, not taken seriously enough the problem of white supremacy and racism until it was too late. They've covered the extremist movements on the right, but not well enough. Just last year, there were hundreds of car attacks. Just to give you one example, hundreds of incidents around the country during the Black Lives Matter protests where white supremacists drove their car into protesters that should have been all over our headlines in our mainstream news. It wasn't. So you have these twin problems of a really sophisticated propaganda campaign coming from the White House, echoed by the right-wing media universe, that has convinced a huge swath of Americans of a completely alternative reality, so that when you talk to them, it feels like we're on two different universes. And then you have the flip side of it, which is our liberal corporate media that has not given enough context to it or covered it when it was too late, have been late to the conversation around the seriousness and the dangers of white supremacy. Early in Trump's presidency, many were loath to call him a white supremacist. There were debates around, well, is he really a racist, or did he just kind of give a wink and a nod to racists? There were these inane debates about whether Donald Trump was really a racist 4 years ago. And many of us in the independent media were saying, well, there's really no doubt about that. My producer and I created a documentary called Make America Racist Again, where we laid out systematically why we should not hold back from showing Donald Trump as the racist that he is and how it's so dangerous. So I think that is a huge part of the conversation around what happened on Wednesday. There's many other aspects as well, which is that Congress has been too kind to Trump. He has too many enablers, both among Republicans and Democrats. It took Nancy Pelosi so long to force an impeachment over a year ago on an issue that in the grand scheme of things wasn't even one of the most important ones that Trump engaged in. He should have been impeached. His extremist agenda should never have been even tolerated, but they gave him a pass. And now there's still people in Congress, even after their own house was attacked, who are debating whether or not it would be the right thing to do to remove Trump from office or impeach him. They're constantly second guessing, hemming and hawing. So that's another piece of the puzzle as well. And I know, if we could talk a whole hour about why things transpired on Wednesday the way they did. But unfortunately, a big part of it is simply the fact that people have been convinced that what they see in the media isn't real. The media itself hasn't helped its own case. One of the protesters, quote unquote, or really we should call them rioters at the Capitol, scrawled "murder the media" on a wall or a door, which is actually the name of a group that goes by that slogan. So yeah, conspiracy thinking, a whole different realm of reality that was created for these people who were truly convinced that they could stop Biden's election. Trump convinced them that if they went there and prevented Congress from carrying out that vote, that somehow states would give in and, okay, let's redo the election so Trump wins. They really convinced themselves of that. And that's really sad.
Well, it's not only sad, it's very dangerous because people are getting killed. People are getting killed over this. And here's the thing where we go from here. Will this stop or will this continue? Would it actually get worse? That's the question that they should be asking. And this is why they should be motivated to take action, immediately take action to stop, to literally, we need to get him out of office and send us. If this doesn't happen, it's only going to get worse.
And that's a little bit frustrating to me on the left when I see that conversation being raised. There's so much cynicism on the left, right? And we're unfortunately the victims of our own coverage for many years, seeing how poorly government has functioned, how much they've let corporations run rampant, how strong the military has been supported. And so we've convinced ourselves, some of us, I think, have convinced ourselves that any response from Congress to Trump would be counterproductive or simply inflame tensions or just simply political theater. You can't not act when an armed mob of extremists attacks the nation's capital. No matter what you think of the government, no matter how critical you are from the left on the government, you cannot do nothing, because by doing nothing when right-wing extremists attack the capital, you're basically rolling over and giving up. You're saying that it was okay for these people to do that. The left should be the strongest voice against right-wing extremism and hate being allowed to get away with what they did. We know that nobody on the left would have made it halfway up those steps had it been Black Lives Matter or any number of organizations that have organized from the left around Congress. So the inaction is intolerable at this point.
And I'd like to follow up on this because there was an incident here in Los Angeles, where a woman was attacked by right-wingers, by Trump's people. And if we don't put an end to this, if we don't, put it the way it is, and these are criminal people. These people are committing serious crimes against you. People of color.
Yeah.
This is only going to get worse.
I think one of our challenges has to be, but we have some lessons from history. One of our challenges has to be, how do we disgrace Trumpism like the way the Germans disgraced Nazism? We need to create a culture and nurture a culture where the name Trump becomes equivalent or becomes as untouchable as the names of fascist dictators. Any association with Trump should consign you to the dustbin of history, to those in history who are judged as harshly as possible. That's our challenge, and I think that cultural shift needs to happen. I mean, those of us on the left have been saying this for years, and now there's people even on the right who are saying, "Oh, maybe he really is a fascist." But we've been shouting about that for years, and so if we and hindsight for this country has had a staggered, stultified, but nonetheless steady march toward progressivism, simply because most people, most Americans, and most human beings in general are compassionate. And we've been right on Black Lives Matter. We've been right on civil rights. We've been right on women's rights. We've been right on the Me Too movement. Causes that have emerged on the left have almost always been vindicated eventually. And this one will be as well. We have to create that culture, nurture that culture of associating Trumpism with the worst aspects of American culture. And anybody associated with Trump should have the stink of Trumpism follow them for the rest of their careers and the rest of their lives until they apologize to the nation. It's not enough to resign 2 weeks before Trump's presidency is over. The people like Betsy DeVos and Elaine Chao and Mitch McConnell need to apologize to the American people and say, "I'm sorry I ever associated myself with Donald Trump."
Sonali, I think that we are on the edge of this, and it can go two ways, because there were some Trump supporters in California, in the Los Angeles area, who were going around. They were anti-maskers, going into grocery stores. They went to the mall and stuff. And I saw some video, and there was this one Trump supporter who was trying to claim that that Trump supporters are oppressed because people, when they see them wearing their Trump hats, they say they hate them and they throw trash at them. So I see there is this kind of thing happening that you're describing, but the problem is that I just read that Jim Clyburn is saying that they should wait until sometime in Biden's first 100 days to actually push the impeachment charges to the Senate.
And remember, Jim Clyburn was the representative that Joe Biden can thank for his change of fortunes about 9 months ago now. Jim Clyburn, unfortunately, he's done some good things, but unfortunately, he has been a capitulationist. He has been somebody who has been one of Donald Trump's inadvertent enablers. And absolutely, that needs to be called out. I don't know how much traction he will have. When you have Senator Lisa Murkowski saying Trump needs to resign or I will change parties, something has shifted. And so it's kind of shocking to see Jim Clyburn speaking out in this way when there are Republicans now that are willing to take on Trump. Not many, but just a handful of Republicans. So Jim Clyburn is absolutely on the wrong side of this issue. And it's disappointing, but not surprising.
Yeah. And what do you think about he's a constitutional law professor, Jonathan Turley? See, he just also wrote an op-ed in opposition of impeaching Trump, in which he said this would be very dangerous for the whole institution of impeachment, because it would violate certain ideas of free speech we have under the Constitution.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've heard his argument.
So there's always going to be a group of people for whom this isn't the right time to impeach. It would be politically wrong. It would set the wrong precedent, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. None of those arguments matter. The House can impeach, and I'm not a constitutional scholar, I'm just coming at this from a journalist, but from what I've
Sure.
seen and read, the House can impeach a president for a very large number of things. They could have impeached Donald Trump on day one. There was already legal, justification for that. The fact that they have not impeached him, that's the precedent that we need to be terrified of. If you cannot, or find your way, if you can justify it yourself that Trump shouldn't be impeached, then literally nobody ever in the history of America will ever be impeached again. If Trump doesn't deserve impeachment, then nobody does, right? Because he has set the bar, his impeachable offenses are so vast and so deep that if you can't even impeach someone like him, then there's no point. We shouldn't even have the right to impeach. What's the point of impeachment? So any arguments at this stage to not impeach Trump fly in the face of, Jonathan Turley and Jim Clyburn and all of these folks, they are part of the problem. And they will look back on this moment and know they were wrong. I'm convinced of it. History will not vindicate their positions.
Right. Now, the other, there's issues also here in California because up north, there on Redding and the parts of Shasta, there's some county supervisors over there that were supposed to have a meeting, and one of the newly elected supervisors broke into the building, allowed all these people to come in there so that they can create all kinds of chaos. It's in the LA article today. We just posted it. But look, this is not going to stop unless you send a strong message that you have crossed the line. It's not going to stop. That's what I'm seeing. But for us on the left, progressives, what are we supposed to be doing? We're supposed to, make sure that we have a strong voice out there and not be intimidated by the Democratic Party that don't want to act. We got to be pushing them. We have to also be in the front of the lines, speaking out and making sure that, these things will not be allowed to happen.
That's a really important point. And I think our challenge as progressives is to connect the past inaction of the Democrats to take strong progressive positions to what we're seeing today. If we can successfully make the case that the Democrats have not lived up, at least in the past several decades, if ever, because the Democrats have not lived up to their ideals, they have fostered a sense of disillusionment in the American public. The fact that in 2016, people didn't like Hillary Clinton so much, and I'm absolutely no fan of Hillary Clinton. I'm one of her strongest critics. But the fact that people said the Democrats have no credibility, I will not vote for Hillary Clinton, even though Trump is on the ballot, is a failure of the Democratic Party that must not be allowed to stand. And I know that progressives have been making this case over and over for the past 4 years. It was that the reason Trump won, in part, obviously the Electoral College and all of those details, but in part, the reason Trump won was because Hillary Clinton simply wasn't good enough and wasn't strong enough, wasn't bold enough, wasn't progressive enough, appeared a hypocrite, right? Because the Democrats say all of these things, and then when it comes time for them to actually do it, and Biden is already showing this, just on the issue of college debt, when he said during his campaign he was interested in wiping out $10,000, and then others said maybe he should wipe out $50,000. Now he's saying, well, I don't know if I have the executive authority to do this, coming on the heels of a man who has successfully used executive authority to devastate our country. Biden is claiming he doesn't have the power. This feeds into Trumpism. And we need to make that case that when the Democrats alienate voters, some section of our society goes into the arms of a man like Trump. And there are literally people at the woman Ashley Babbitt, who was killed, the Air Force veteran who was killed in the Capitol, boasted about how she had voted for Obama. Okay, something in her life and something in her perception of Democrats caused her to be convinced, and something in the Democrats' feeding of that perception caused her to be convinced that that now Trump was her political home. That's not to say that the Democrats made Trump. It's just to say that they didn't do their jobs, and they inadvertently enabled Trumpism, and it can happen again. The next Trump can be less, could be more effective, could be a little smarter, could be more of an effective fascist than Trump was. I mean, we benefit from the fact that Trump has been so ineffective because he's put himself above his ideology. Someone else who's more of an ideologist and more ideological, rather, when it comes to right-wing extremism, could be much more dangerous than even Trump. And the Democrat, so that's our challenge. I feel like, just going back to your question, if progressives can make this case and say we need to push Democrats from the left harder than we've ever done now, then we have a chance of furthering progressivism and ending Trumpism.
Seems like there's so much responsibility that the progressive movement has on its shoulders.
But we are bigger than ever. That's the good news. Is like there are more people who identify as progressives now, from just my own personal experience that I can see because of Trump, than before. It was like that wave of progressivism after Bush, right? so that's a good news.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just think it's like, the progressives, not only do we have to push for this, for all these policies, we also have to like make sure that we don't fall
into
a
privilege. It's wonderful.
Yeah, right.
Well,
I just see like more work piling up on my table.
Well, not for you. But that's the thing, is like we can't think of this as something that individuals alone should be taking on, right? You're already doing your part. There's many other people that will become and have become and are becoming active.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think you're right, and I hope you're right. But so I just want to say that what I experienced being in the South is that there's like a very small handful of people who literally do everything, who are like involved in every single, progressive or mutual aid organization, and it's always the same people. So I feel that in some cases it's very overwhelming because it's the same people that continue to take on this load of doing all of the work. So I think maybe at this moment I would turn to the audience and say, please do what you can. So it's not always the same people doing the work, because it's very exhausting work.
And it's also tough during a pandemic because there's only so much activism that people can physically engage in, especially if they, feel unsafe. But I learned the hard way many years ago, the importance of self-care and the importance of limiting one's activities in a way that's reasonable and managed. We need people for the long haul, right? If you kill yourself trying to make change, then it's not worth it. Because you're not going to be around to enjoy that change. You're not going to be around to be even effective to nurture that change. We need more and more people to join in. We need more people to do the little things that add up. And I think sometimes progressive leaders convince ourselves that we're the only ones doing the work, but that's not true. The outrage that has been generated, especially after Wednesday's attack on the Capitol, is actually much deeper than we think it is. There are actually a lot of Trump supporters, from everything that I can read, that are quietly disgusted and realizing and seeing their eyes open, understanding that a big part of it was a big lie. There's a small but vocal faction that's going the other direction, but they're vocal. That's because they're vocal. And I think that, I know I might sound a little bit too hopeful around this, but I am actually quite optimistic that this has opened enough people's eyes to the reality of what needs to be done now.
One of the things that I know is when we saw the rise of Bernie Sanders and recognition for what he stood for and what he was fighting for, the amount of people that got behind him, it was the issues that brought us together. And he created a movement that was so humongous, and I don't have to repeat myself. You all know very well what he has been able to achieve and move, even in, let's say, for example, the Medicare for all, that affects every American, regardless of your political position. And these are the people that are. There was actually a lot of Republicans that agree with him, because it touched their lives. And I think that we have an opportunity right now to continue to do this work, to continue to come together behind the issues and fight back, and if we can do that, we are going to be okay. And I am seeing, because I'm out there on the ground, I'm out there with people, I am seeing such a response from people, even through the pandemic. Here at the food bank in Los Angeles, we saw how, of course, we didn't know how bad the pandemic was. All of us, were in the dark on this, but we knew that it could kill you. And one of the things that I saw is the immediate response by the progressive movement, by the activists, by those that fight for the people to respond. And we have had such a great response with volunteers every single Saturday coming through, and this is what I'm talking about. And you're correct, Sonali. I think that we are in a position that we should feel also happy to the fact that we have people out there fighting, and that we may be turning around the corner in some of these things.
Yeah, and it is pretty remarkable. I've seen the Urban Partners Los Angeles do their work every Saturday, and it's very heartwarming. I sewed some masks early on for some of the volunteers, and felt, sad that I couldn't be there in person, but just very much impressed. And this is the kind of work that can also get people involved in more political activities. There's so many different entry points to progressivism, right? And I'm glad you brought up the fact that there were people on the right who were moved by Bernie Sanders, because it's not like Bernie, bless him, has a stunningly charismatic personality, right? So they weren't backing him because, it's Bernie's person. They were backing him because, in fact, maybe because he submerged his personality to the issues. And all he did was talk about the issues, and those issues resonated. We know that people on the right agree with the idea of raising the federal minimum wage. We know they agree with the idea of universal health care for all. It's just how you present it to them and who presents it to them. Depending on that, they take it seriously or not. We know that people on the right, care about human rights, care about hunger in America. All of these issues that the Democrats, need to take steps toward. I mean, it should be no-brainer for them to expose the Republicans. But if you don't mind, I want to pick up on one other issue about and this is what you started with, Margot, which is the succumbing to conspiracism. And unfortunately, too many of us on the left succumb to this as well. Slightly different issues, but with some increasing overlap, and it's quite disturbing. For many years, I remember when I started my journalistic career, the whole 9/11 truther movement was very strong on the left, was also very strong on the right. The people who made these certain documentaries that unfortunately got an airing on my radio station as well. Alex Jones, that's where he became famous, the whole 9/11 truther thing. So the conspiracy theory driven groups were on the far right and the far left, and kind of joined in the middle. And we see some of that today as well. The folks who are convinced that vaccinations cause autism, the vaccinations are going to kill you, and now the theory that it's going to change your DNA. Enough. If we on the left are convinced that progressivism is important, we should be using data-driven, research-driven, fact-based thinking to motivate ourselves. We need much more media literacy on the left than we have. I see so many people, well-meaning people, post, get their information through memes, get their information through some random website that has convinced them because of some manipulated video, or even a video that's taken out of context that suddenly has convinced them, or I know somebody who knows somebody whose kid died the day after they got vaccinated, therefore vaccines. It's insidious. And we have to start addressing this in our own ranks, because if we don't, we lose credibility to be the voice of reason compared to the right. And B, we also end up becoming susceptible to the same kinds of dangerous and magical thinking that those on the right have become susceptible to. We have to address this issue. And I know every time I cover conspiracy theorists and some of the conspiracy theories on the left, I get angry emails and phone calls, some of them veering on very hateful language, others being quite polite, but gently telling me that they think I'm utterly stupid for not believing A, B, and C. And, it won't shut me up. And we have to be bold enough. Those of us on the left who kind of privately shake our heads or roll our eyes at this need to stop doing it in private. Speak out. If we can't clean our own house of these conspiracy theories, then we stand to be in the same boat as some of these far right people. We shouldn't tolerate it either.
Yeah, we saw some of the things that really troubled me. How again, they went after Ocasio, they went after the squad, they have gone after Bernie. Agree with the way they voted or whatever,
Well, yeah, I think those are slightly different things. I think, are you talking about the whole controversy around Medicare for all versus?
But, I see it more, not necessarily just on that, but just overall, how a lot of progressives, they expect, things to be perfect, and it's not going to be that. We need
Right. I mean, I've seen people saying, look, Biden's predictably doing what we said he would do, and now you expect us to, believe that he's better than Trump. It's like, well, no one said Biden. Nobody on the left thought Biden was going to be Bernie Sanders. We knew he simply wasn't Trump. And if you can't see the difference between Joe Biden and Donald Trump, then you're misinformed too.
Well, there's a lot of cynicism on the left, if we can call it. So I think a lot of people are very cynical, but I think in general, a lot of people have a lot of distrust in the government because the government has historically failed the American people over the last several decades. So I think that's part of what feeds people toward these conspiracies, because we are living in a crisis. And when we are in crisis, I think we try to find answers for why and how we got there. And for a lot of people, that means turning to these grand conspiracy theories that connect everything together in this great web. And oh my gosh, it makes sense. There's this group of people who are controlling everything. That's why my life is horrible. And I can barely put food on my table, or, whatever, right? Like, this would never be happen. This just doesn't make sense. How could we have a pandemic? Like, all these horrible things that happen, people try to make sense of. And because, as you said, like media literacy, but just like the fundamental thing of critical thinking that is lacking in our education system these days, I think is why a lot of people have turned to this. They cannot tell fact from fiction, and they go down these directions. And I think also, to be honest, I think that a lot of people, especially older generations who grew up believing that they should trust the news and what they see on television, they see a talking head and they say, yeah, this is an expert. And rightfully so. I think there was a point where you could really say, yeah, like what I see on TV is pretty close to the truth to whatever degree. But now, because I think people are conditioned that way, when they see anybody on a screen who talks in an authoritative tone, they're more likely to believe it, because they've already been conditioned to believe anybody who speaks in an authoritative tone.
Right.
So you have a lot of people who go on YouTube and they watch these like people who they consider themselves like alternative medicine or whatever, holistic doctors, and there are good holistic doctors. I will say that up front. But there are some up there who also promote these conspiracy theories. So it's like, if I see somebody who is an authoritative figure on screen and I'm conditioned to believe it, then I'm more likely to believe what they say and take it as fact, because, well, this guy, he's got a doctor before his name, so he must be right? Must be Bill Gates.
One of the issues that I see coming up, and I think we need more analysis of this, is that our healthcare system is so broken. A lot of people have not just lost trust in the medical system as it exists, but also simply can't necessarily afford to see specialists when they have issues, and have bought into this idea that healthcare should be one of personal responsibility. And unfortunately, this is the logic of the Whole Foods CEO, because we see on the left these ideas that, well, why do we need a vaccine? We need to let the natural immunity take hold in our communities. Or if we eat right and exercise and get plenty of sunshine and vitamin D, and all of which are, of course, yes, it's true. If you are healthier, you're less likely to succumb to disease. But of course, it doesn't mean that disease only strikes those who are less healthy. And some of us have genetic mutations and predispositions and whatnot, or we live in places where we are succumbing to environmental racism, and we can't just go out and buy a pure food from Whole Foods, and that's the way to take care of ourselves. But those issues are connected. This idea that taking care of oneself, because we can't trust the medical establishment, or the medical establishment isn't there for us, we need to all focus on our own health individually, eat clean and pure, and et cetera, and avoid putting dangerous chemicals into your body. All of these ideas go hand in hand, and suddenly people who have cancer aren't doing chemotherapy because they're convinced the chemotherapy is going to kill them, and they end up either not surviving, or if they do survive, in spite of not taking chemotherapy, they're validated in their decision to avoid that. My mother's had cancer 4 times, and the only reason she's alive is because of chemotherapy. So as knowing that it's a destructive therapy that hurts healthy cells as well as it hurts cancer cells. But if you think about it, if you do some research and you understand how it works and why it works, it makes sense. But if you put everything into this box of putting foreign objects in your body is going to hurt you and kill you, this kind of thinking, which is unfortunately very prevalent on the left and on the right, can be dangerous, especially during a pandemic. There are far too many people who are not going to be getting vaccinated, which is going to hurt all of us. It doesn't matter if I'm the only person who's vaccinated. If I'm among 100 unvaccinated people, I'm going to be much more likely to get the disease, even though I'm vaccinated, because herd immunity doesn't work like that.
Yeah, we've seen outbreaks over the years of childhood diseases that we didn't see outbreaks before because of the lack of buy-in on vaccines, of parents who think their kids are going to get autism. And you make a good point about cancer treatments, that, yeah, it does sometimes kill healthy cells. But then again, when you get a cold, your own immune system kills healthy cells. That's why you get a sore throat, because it's literally attacking every cell that it thinks has the virus in it. And it's a destructive process. But then the body heals, right? So I think we have to get the whole perspective, and a lot of people, they don't have it because they lack the education too, which is the big problem.
Healthcare conversation on the left needs to focus around Medicare for all. And when it doesn't, it veers into these dangerous territories of just eat healthy, live clean, don't avoid vaccines. Not that I'm saying that we shouldn't eat healthy, but if everybody had access to free healthcare, paid for and funded by taxpayers, then these notions and these ideas would be less dangerous, because because then you could literally combat somebody who said, I'm going to fight this disease by using holistic medicine, with saying, well, why don't you just go to the doctor anyway? It can't hurt you. Just get a doctor's opinion. It's not going to cost you anything. Literally, when you have Medicare for all. And we can, we need to work to that. So bringing it back to the political issue, if Joe Biden and the Democrats, who now control the House, control the Senate, if they don't prioritize these bread and butter progressive issues, the whole country will suffer, but the Democratic Party will suffer too. At least they need to worry about them. If we can just speak to their own self-interest, the Democratic Party has no future if it doesn't push these strongly progressive issues right out of the bat. You can't walk and chew gum at the same time. You can impeach Trump and push for Medicare for all bill at the same time, and you will be quite popular in the country if you do.
Well, the stage is pretty clear right now. Biden, of course, controls the White House. Then we have the Senate, and we have Congress. He has everything he needs to push forward. We saw the failures on the Obama administration when he had the same thing. Pretty much the ball is in his courtyard. He's got to come out strong. He's got to do some, and I understand there are challenges because we are facing numerous crises, but that's why he wanted to become president. So really is up to the Democratic Party where they're going to go from now and what they are going to become. So we hope that they do the right thing. People will be willing to support them, just like they support him for president. You know, he was a terrible candidate, but we saw the two differences. Again, everything falls now on the Democratic Party.
And I think that one of the good...
Sonali, can I just step in for just a quick moment? I just want to remind everybody that they're watching Stand Up, Fight Back, and our special guest today is Sonali Kolhatkar. So go ahead, Sonali.
Yeah, I think one of the pieces of good news, one of the reasons for optimism is that unlike during the brief Obama period where Democrats controlled Congress, we have just a handful, and maybe that's all we need, is a handful of powerful, eloquent, politically savvy young people and not so young people of color in the House, and also to a small extent in the Senate now, that will hopefully really truly be the voice of the people, right? I mean, I'm excited about Senator Raphael Warnock in the Senate, together with Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and any other progressive senators who hopefully will grow backbones like them, and having the Progressive Caucus in the House. We haven't had that to this extent before. People who have come from grassroots movements and are in the halls of power. Representative Cori Bush, I'm so excited to see what she does and how she speaks. I mean, she came from our movements, and we have that. And, I know there's people who sort of like to equate the AOC and the Squad folks to the Tea Partyers on the right. But the huge difference was that the Tea Party's politics have been thoroughly disgraced and discredited, and they were not nearly as smart, savvy, and politically proficient as the members of the Squad. And their policies, when they articulated them, were horrifying. When the Progressive Squad articulates their policies, if you push away all of those biases that they face because of their skin color and gender, what they're speaking about resonates deeply with most Americans. So that's exciting for me. So that, to me, is going to be our bulwark in the halls of Congress. Now, I know there's people who think that even those folks, even the Squad, are not going far enough, are not progressive enough. But the Biden administration hasn't started yet. And, I think that we certainly shouldn't adopt a position of let them do our job. We all need to be pushing Biden. We all need to be pushing Kamala Harris, and encouraging the Squad to do so in a concerted, organized campaign, not through a hashtag 1 week before you want them to do something.
Exactly. One of the problems President had, the fact that we was organized at the last minute. Always react rather than being proactive and being thoughtful. And that's what's going to win a lot of these campaigns on the issues that we care about, is when we think ahead of time, when we plan, when we coordinate, when we form allies, when we expand our base, when we are rooted and grounded and find resources to be able to execute those plans. That's what's going to make the difference, I think.
I agree. I mean, look at what happened in Georgia, right? Where you had the culmination of a years-long effort by Black-led voter registration groups that linked very successfully racist voter suppression to electoral politics. While the outcome was narrow, the politics were broad. And it was a years-long effort, and it bore fruit. Some of our biggest challenges on the left is patience, right? Laying the groundwork, doing the hard work, and understanding that change takes time, but change does come. Whatever we have won so far has been the result not just of immediate, quick, knee-jerk reactions, but long-term organizing, hard work, door-to-door, grassroots campaigns. Those things work. And, I like to draw an analogy between political progress and people's own health, right? We were talking about healthcare earlier. What's the magic bullet for being healthy and losing weight and being fit? It's not some magic bullet diet. It's incorporating exercise into your daily life, eating healthy, understanding there will be problems, dealing with them in the right way, taking care of your mind, your body, your health. The same way we need to nurture our democracy, understand that it takes political activism on a day-to-day basis. It's a long-term thing, not a once demonstration and you expect change suddenly and then you're disappointed when it doesn't happen. It's nurturing our democracy, understanding it's part of our civic health and civic duty, doing it for the long haul and seeing the results after years of work and building on those results. We should be thinking of our participation in our democracy, our civic participation, as long-term efforts on a collective level that isn't just a handful of people doing all the work, but a whole bunch of people doing a little bit of work every day and nurturing our democracy, being on top of it, understanding what's happening, fostering independent media, fostering grassroots organizations and campaigns, participating in them and doing it every single day. It's not a one shot. All right, I gave my donation, now I can go back to ignoring the country and our democracy and then getting angry when it didn't work.
Right. So Sonali, Biden takes office not too long from now. It's 10 days from now, I believe. He will be inaugurated, the next president of the United States. What are your hopes for the first 100 days of the Biden administration?
Well, as a journalist, I'm planning on covering Biden in a way that elucidates what he's doing, why he's doing it, exposing, just as I would expose for any president, when there is collusion with corporatists. My hope is that we have enough push against Biden from the left that countervails the push that he is facing from the right. It was already there when it was clear that he was going to be the nominee for the Democratic Party. You saw the punditry in the op pages of the newspapers warn him to not be like Bernie Sanders, warn him to kowtow to the center. The forces that Biden is facing, regardless of who Biden is, because it almost doesn't matter, whether he is. It matters what forces he faces and how he responds to them, less than what his specific ideology and instinct is. So he's already facing enormous pressure from the right and from the centrists and from the capitulationists, from Jim Clyburn, from Tom Friedman, from the mainstream punditry, who are going to be the voice of reason to Biden. Let's return to the pre-Trump era, the voice of reason. He's going to be facing all of these reasonable sounding pressures, and it's our challenge to push him as hard as possible from the left without turning into the right, but push him as hard as possible from the left and making it about the issues. We want Medicare for all. We want for college debt forgiveness, a federal minimum wage of $15 an hour linked to inflation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And there's some bright spots. His cabinet is a mix of centrists and some good people. So there's openings. We have to use those openings, and we can't let that go. We can't give him a pass. Absolutely.
Now, I gotta ask you, immigration.
Yeah.
That's something very important, and we need to, we're gonna be watching him. What are some of the views on that, and what are you looking forward to?
That is such a huge question. I mean, we could talk about how Trump has devastated our immigration system for the whole hour. There's the easy stuff that Biden can do, which is to stop detaining whole families and stop separating parents from children, put government resources toward reuniting those people who are still separated. The no-brainers that shouldn't be unpopular with anybody. It should absolutely be done, go to where the suffering is the greatest, in the Remain in Mexico policy, stop the building of the border wall, the Trump's border wall, I should say, all of these issues. But then there's also so much damage that Trump did to legal forms of immigration. It was already hard to immigrate legally to the US, which is why we have so many people trying to come in without papers, because they have not been able to, they haven't had the opportunity to immigrate through with paperwork. And I've been personally affected by the impacts to the legal forms of immigration. Trump made it much harder for people to apply for green cards. And then he outright last year banned people being able to sponsor their parents or their children via green card, and of course, work visas. I was in the process of applying for my parents to move to the United States. They live in the United Arab Emirates, far away from all their children. They both are in their 70s with multiple health issues, and I wanted to bring them to the US to live with me like Melania Trump did for her parents. Literally, that is what our First Lady did, to bring her parents to this country. The way of immigration that Trump and his advisor Stephen Miller, the mini fascist, denounced for years as chain migration. That's what his wife used to bring her parents, except of course they're white, so supposedly it's different. And he, in a decision that just hasn't gotten much attention, it's so hard to find any news coverage of it, he banned people like me from being able to sponsor my parents to come to the United States through legal means. I'm separated from my parents, and anything could happen to them any day, and I'm terrified. So he just extended that ban was till December 31st. He put it in using under cover of the pandemic. It should have been something that Congress decided. He tried to pass it through Congress in the first 2 years of his presidency. They rejected it. So then he did it under cover of the pandemic, saying that because of safety issues, we're going to ban these green card categories. And that ban was supposed to expire December 31st. And on December 31st, he extended it to March 31st. Now, of course, Biden can come in and immediately undo that. Hopefully he will. But there's a massive backlog now of applications. Unless Biden actually appropriates money towards processing those applications, what should have taken 12 months for my parents to come, it might now take years. I don't know if I'll ever see my parents again. And this is terrifying. I could travel to the United Arab Emirates after this pandemic is over and see them maybe 1 week every 6 months, and that's about it. But this is the damage that Trump has done. This is why I was picking Biden over Trump, because I was personally impacted and have been personally impacted. Those of us who have been personally impacted by Trump saw clearly the damage and the difference between him and Biden. And now the only hope is for Biden to undo this,
What do you think is the likelihood of Biden actually tackling immigration issues? Because it has not really been discussed a lot. As you said, we don't really hear a lot about it anymore. And in fact, I don't think he campaigned very much on any of the issues at the border. So, I mean, do you think that this is something that he's going to be considering? I mean,
he has talked about reversing the immigration devastation that Trump put in place. He's talked about it. He has a list of issues that on his campaign website. You're right; it wasn't front and center, and unfortunately, that's partly because our public discourse started ignoring the issue of immigration. Once the family separations issue burst into public consciousness, caused outrage, died down when a judge stopped it from continuing. It really wasn't brought up very much. NBC brought it up during one of the debates because their media outlet had covered how those separated families remained separated from their children. And so it was raised briefly during one of the debates, and Trump lied, blatantly saying our government is doing everything we can to reunite them. Absolutely not. The government was standing in the way, making it harder for immigration lawyers and the judge to do so, refusing to turn over information that could have helped them find the parents. So it came up very briefly. But this is, again, where the grassroots pressure has to be in place. So I'm trying to meet with my representative, Judy Chu, who's introduced an immigration bill in the House that I'm hoping, she will push hard for. There are Democrats who say they're pro-immigrant, and they need to have their feet held to the fire. So I'm going to be bring this up. I wrote an op-ed about it for asking for Biden to help reunite me with my family and an organization that I was working with. Shopped that op-ed around to all of these major outlets. None of them wanted to publish it. The Washington Post didn't, the Hill didn't, none of them wanted to publish it. It finally got picked up in Salmon, but it's part of it. The problem is that the mainstream media doesn't want to discuss these issues. There's a lot of stuff about how work visas are banned and the green cards for jobs, because that's what corporations and the business industry is interested in. There's been lawsuits by businesses and corporations about the work visa ban, because of course immigration to them is just a matter of cheap labor. But there's just been very, very little attention and attention paid to cases like mine and my family's.
Well, so much to talk about. So many things are going to be coming down. For us progressives, it's going to come down to making sure that we remain paying attention, don't be discouraged, staying focused, and organizing our communities behind the issues that we care about, whether it be climate change, education, our jail system, et cetera, policing. Those things are still pretty hot and affect many, many, many people. So moving forward, we got to stay focused. That should be, for progressives, that should be the number one goal, staying focused. Don't get discouraged.
I agree, absolutely. And I'm so glad you brought up policing and our criminal justice system. That is one of our top issues. And thanks to the hard work of activists, especially Black activists and organizations around the country over the past year, this issue is broken into the national discourse. Biden needs to absolutely be held accountable. I was disappointed that he picked somebody like Merrick Garland for the Attorney General, because Garland unfortunately has a history of being too pro-police. His feet need to be held to the fire. At the very least, they need to return to what Obama was doing in terms of the consent decrees, holding police departments accountable, and then move way beyond that into strong federal investigations of police brutality cases. And then, of course, we need to push our Democratic governors and our Democratic mayors, under whose watch criminal, and racist policing has run rampant. I mean, we let these people off the hook. Of course, Black Lives Matter does not let Eric Garcetti off the hook, thank goodness. But far too many other Democratic mayors who have overseen racist policing are let off the hook. So it's not just pressure on the Biden administration, it's pressure on all our liberal leaders to get them to live up to their ideals, and also organizing to get the crazy extremist right-wingers out of office. There are people who are holding office today who were at the Capitol on Wednesday. There are crazy QAnon supporting Trumpsters in office, and I'm including Senator Ted Cruz in that now. I don't know if he's a QAnon supporter, but he's a Trumper. They need to lose office. That stink of Trumpism needs to follow them for the rest of their political careers, and they need to be removed from office.
Yeah, I think actually Cory Bush is trying to push a bill through the House that would expel people like Ted Cruz, which would be fantastic. Obviously, there was somebody in the comments who suggested the NLG Immigration Project. I don't know if you've had a chance to talk with them about your parents, but they said maybe you could reach out to them. Just wanted to make
I've been working with several organizations, including the Immigrant Rights Resource Center of San Gabriel, and several other organizations, the National Immigration Law Center. And just to point out, really, just as an aside on the issue of immigration, I'm separated from my my parents, about almost now 20 years after I had to fight the US government for my own citizenship. I don't know how many people are aware of this, but I was a green card holder through marriage, and applied for my citizenship, and was one of thousands of people caught in the Bush administration's loophole around immigration, where we were told to wait for our FBI background checks. And I passed every hurdle. And at the very last stage, before being granted my citizenship, I was told to wait for the FBI background check. I waited 2 years and nothing happened. And thousands of people like me were caught in this quiet loophole. And I was a lead plaintiff in a class action lawsuit brought by the ACLU and the National Immigration Law Center. And we eventually won that lawsuit, and it judge had to force Homeland Security to give me my citizenship. So I've like dealt
Wow.
with the inequalities and the injustices of the illegal immigration system for decades now, and now here I am fighting it again.
You're
Gosh.
And before we wanted to wrap up, you play music.
I do.
My goodness, I seen some of your videos. Tremendous.
Yeah,
Oh,
I'm getting ready for our next performance in a few hours. You know,
Awesome.
this is part of my self-care, and I really want to talk to people very briefly about this. Find ways, those of us who are working on the front lines for justice, find ways to have a creative outlet, find ways to, while you're working for justice, take time for yourself. Carlos, I'm talking to you. I see you everywhere. I know you are one of the most guilty of this. I hope you take the time to find ways to relax and to renew yourself and rejuvenate yourself. This is, you know, what I do. I do art and music and whatnot, but we all do need to. Those among us who do much more than we should, we're making up for the inaction of others. Please take care of yourself. You know, I don't know if you play an instrument, but I'd love to see a performance someday, Carlos.
I think Carlos's involvement in the movement is his self-care. I don't know. I can't imagine him doing anything else.
Right? It gives us meaning. Being working for justice gives our lives meaning, and for those who don't, it's so satisfying to work for justice. It gives your life meaning. My TEDx talk from 2014, I think it was. Google it if you get a chance. I did give a 15-minute talk about why I switched from astronomy and physics to journalism, and it was about the pursuit of meaning rather than the pursuit of happiness. And it gives your life meaning. And I really, you know, but you still need some other creative outlets to stay sane, Carlos.
you are 100% correct.
Yeah.
I had not been to the beach, I don't know for how long. The other day, actually, before New Year's, I actually went for a walk at the beach, and it felt so good. I was like, oh my God. It's like, you know, I'm so involved in so many things that I neglect myself, and and I'm guilty of that.
And you may burn out, and that's not good. The movement needs you. You can't burn out. And I have to do this. I've learned to say no to a lot of things because I want to be in this for the long haul. It's not my job to save the world. It's my job to be one of millions that work to save the world. And I'm going to do my job. And all of you out there listening, I'm sure we're speaking to the choir, because I'm sure the people who are listening and watching are among our most active. But maybe, you know, let's convince our family and our friends to do more than just be spectators to our democracy, so that just a few of us don't have to do it all.
Yeah, absolutely. That's amazing that you studied astronomy and physics. I actually also studied physics. I have a master's in physics, but I actually found a way to do something within my research. So I switched research. I was building robotic models to study lizards bearing in the sand, and then I switched, and now I work on climate change and water resources. So I'm in an entirely different department, but I'm doing much more meaningful work at least for myself, and it makes me happier. I feel like I'm contributing in a way, at least in an immediate sense. For me, I needed to feel like I was contributing in an immediate sense. If this was going to be my work, I needed to make it something meaningful. So there's always ways. You just have to find what works for yourself, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, my science background helped me as a journalist. You know, it helps me know how to do research, understand statistics, understand what it means when I read the results of scientific studies. That's been tremendous for me. I started out, you know, degrees in physics and astronomy and a master's in astrophysics, and I was writing software at Caltech for a space telescope simulator when I quit, and you know, was very loud. I quit at a time when it was much easier to quit one's job than it is now, and I didn't have kids, and my mortgage was affordable back then, and so I was able to quit and look for something meaningful, and got very lucky with KPFK and found my calling. But all of us who want to do something meaningful in our lives, you don't have to change your career to do it. There are many of us, and especially there are already people among us who are engaged in meaningful work, right? If you're a teacher or a nurse, you're doing your bit. Like, no one expects you to, on top of that, go out and do more. You're already helping society. I'm talking about, those among us who might have a little more privilege, and maybe you work at JPL, maybe you work in a university, or maybe you're a student who has a little bit of spare time and don't have to work an extra job to make ends meet, and you have a little extra time. Those are the folks, if you can, participate, because we all need to be engaged and acting.
Wow, thank you.
I guess we're probably out of time now. We've been at this for over an hour. We should let Sonali go prepare for her wonderful music performance. Is this a public performance?
Yeah.
Is it online? Can our viewers watch you?
We have a YouTube channel. If you search for Love and Subversion, that's what my husband and I call ourselves.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, it's on Instagram and Facebook. It's a bizarre little embarrassing sideshow to my life.
It sounds wonderful. Wonderful. It's been such a pleasure having you today, Sonali. This discussion was just really great, and I wish we had so much more time than we do, Carlos and Sonali, because there's so many threads here that we could just go down for hours and talk about. Yeah. We just don't have.
So, and if I can just give a plug to my show on KPFK, first of all, please support KPFK if you can. My show is on every weekday at 4 p.m. in the afternoons. Used to be in the mornings. Now it's at 4 p.m. in weekdays from 4 to 5 Pacific time. And you can just watch all our interviews at risingupwithsonali.com. So that's just risingupwithsonali.com. And I'd love for you to, you can share the interviews. You can watch them all online. Also on Free Speech TV weekdays at 3 p.m.
Awesome. Carlos, any last thoughts before we sign off?
You want to talk a little bit about tonight, Margot?
Yeah. Okay. Yes. So I just gone completely blank. I forgot to write down her name. So Carlos, can you tell us a little bit? Can you remind me about her name? Yeah. Sorry.
Our guest will be Andrea Leon Grossman, and a very important campaign that is happening right now. Margaret?
Yeah, so she's going to come on tonight. We're going to do our 6 p.m. show, and we're going to talk about these desalination plants that these private corporations are trying to convince the governor and the government in California to fund. So these are private corporations that are trying to use public money in order to create these very expensive water projects to replace our existing water system with these desalination plants. So there's a lot of controversy over this in terms of the pollution to the environment, the water, the ocean, and also the fact that it would raise our water prices here in California to very high levels, which would have detrimental effects on average working Americans. So this is going to be a very important show tonight at 6 p.m. It's going to be a call to action. We need people to really do something about this and turn out to stop this from happening in the state. So please tune in at 6 p.m. We'll be here on the Facebook page, the Bernie Sanders Brigade page. And that's 6 p.m. Pacific time for anyone who is not on the West Coast. So thank you again, Sonali, and thank you, Carlos, for reminding me about this. I completely let it slip. And I hope that we can have you back again, Sonali. Sure. We can talk about more issues once Biden is in office, because there's going to be a lot, and we'd love to get the perspective of somebody who is an active journalist and an investigative journalist, a deep thinker. I think it's just our audience would really benefit from having
I love that. Absolutely. Thank you so much. What an honor to be on this program with you guys. I appreciate it.
Love you very much.
Thank you.
Well, thank you everyone again for joining us. Excuse me. You've been watching Stand Up Fight Back. I'm Margot Pies, your co-host with Carlos Marroquin right below me. We air every Sunday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern time, and every now and then we do a 6 p.m. show. That's 6 p.m. Pacific time and 9 p.m. Eastern time. We air on the Bernie Sanders Brigade page and also simulcast on YouTube under Inside Out News. So please follow us, like us, share us with your friends, and tune in. Stay safe, everyone, and wear a mask, and we'll see you soon.